You are the bell within a bell that tolls to tell life's essence, and without a sound, over any distance, breaks the spell of silence. Velkommen. Cometh the Sile of Blessed. Je kaeti Maxine Gaudia, and je cutlet Max. Je Gahema, je Reykjavik. Well, I don't know. It's really difficult for me with this English business. It's so much easier, but I'm going to do it anyway. Je gaat leiden Islandske mer erfit. Just miss it, just keep missing it like that. I'm here to basically speak to you about things that you may have known in my book, Journey to the Center of the Self, which you either have read or you've seen me in some of my discussions or my groups. And you know that I love Iceland. So my main purpose of this particular show is to help you to look more at yourself, to look more deeply at yourself, and to understand as Icelanders that you're just great people all together, and that your country is great. And it would be really important if I can help you in some way. I know I'm an Utlandinger, I know this, I know I'm Bondarican, but still I observe, and I observe really, really good things. Not that I don't see some of the things that are not the best, but we're human. But this country has more beauty and more intellect and more genius than any place I've ever seen. So much so that when I got off a plane to come here, I felt I had to stay here forever. Except forever sometimes comes periodically. So I would like you to listen to what I have to say, maybe to investigate within yourself a little bit of what I'm saying. And when I introduce my guest, who's a wonderful gentleman, you'll begin to see what this Icelander is like and how he may in some way relate to you. So, let me introduce him to you. This is I would say he's my friend. I've known him for a long time, but he's an amazing man. He does many, many things, and a lot of it is based on helping Icelanders. His name is Jakob Freeman Magnusson.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being my guest, and for having the courage to be my first guest.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm fearless, as you know.
I know you're fearless. Obviously I am too. I would like to ask you, who do you think you're like more, your mother or your father? Or your grandmother or your grandfather?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be born at an early age.
We were all born at an early age.
Some lame joke. The two parents that came from opposite sides of Iceland. My father was from the western part, from a farm. My mother from the northern part. And they met here in Reykjavik. Got married quickly and had me. And then went to live in New York.
Really?
At the tender age of when I was 1 year of age.
Okay.
And
we have something in common.
yes. They actually decided they would go first, and then I was supposed to come, but then they found New York a bit too cutting edge and wild, especially the wild west side of New York where they happened to live. So I was fortunate enough to stay with my grandparents, my namesake, Jakob Frímannsson, from the age of 1 to the age of 5, with my parents coming periodically to Iceland.
Not unusual for Icelanders, is that
So
correct?
the first woman I remember in my life was my grandmother, and we were extremely close. She was the first woman I remember, and I was fortunate enough to hold her hand while she passed away to another frequency. And my grandfather became a great role model for me, and I still have a big statue of him in my home.
Do you feel
and
that
I
you
look,
like him?
Yeah, I feel that he gave me so much because he had no children himself. My mother was his adopted daughter. It was in those days where one little stifled ovary pipe prevented a couple from having a child, so they adopted her, and my parents decided to make it up to them by letting them bring up little Jakob for at least 3-4 years.
Okay.
That was wonderful, except I missed Mama, of course, when I started calling my grandmother Mother, much to her and other people's surprise.
Did
So-
she feel like that for you as you got older?
Well, she was always very close, yes. So I mentioned these grandparents as something very, very important to me, something that I learned a lot from. And then my parents came, and of course my mother was the bohemian
No.
type. She was the artist, very, very talented, both as pianist, visual artist, and she was like a Renaissance woman. In those days, women weren't really supposed to be artists by profession here in Iceland, but she painted wonderful porcelain things and wonderful things that we still have. And she encouraged me to be a musician, while everyone else wanted me to be like a doctor, lawyer, or a businessman. So
Who would you say, excuse me, who would you say was emotionally unavailable to you?
well,
Not because they meant to be, but
my parents were, of course, unavailable to me for the first very important years of my life. So when they came back, I depended on my mother for the first years, from 5 till about 10. But then she, like many other women and men in Iceland, became almost a helpless victim of the great Bacchus, the king of alcohol. And that got very much in the way of an emotional relationship with her.
unavailable.
Yes, unavailable.
So
And,
may I ask the next question?
well, let me just finish first at saying that my father became then the father and mother
Okay.
role. And he is probably the one who influenced me most in terms of bringing me up. But the window of like 5 to 7 years was very important in how one develops, and I'm very grateful for that. They gave me a lot of very good emotional advice and emotional nourishment and things that I will always be grateful for. So to make a short answer to your very big question, I look like my father more than I look like my mother. I have my father's manners more than my mother's, but I am kind of probably as a personality more similar to her.
So that's what I say. Who did you perceive as emotionally unavailable?
Well,
Your mother?
my mother, yes, because she was not herself for most of the time.
Then let me say this. Would you say that after that, when you picked women, either in the beginning, middle, or end, and I'm sure they were all perfectly nice, but do you feel that you tended to pick the emotionally unavailable person? Not in the beginning, they wouldn't look like that, but in the end they would become like that.
It's kind of in the complex modern fabric of society in Iceland, where you allow yourself to go out with lots of girls, and you have several spouses throughout a lifetime.
Yes.
The answer is yes and no. I've been with women that were both very present and very absent, and it's not something you choose. It is something that emerges or reveals itself sort of once you have a relationship with someone, and then you have to weigh out what is most important, the emotional proximity and closeness, or the pragmatic, practical running of a home and a family, and just, the general environment is either cool or it isn't.
But if you're doing that, you are still missing what you missed from the time you were young. So you may fulfill your life, you may change your life, but in some way, it then directs you along a course. So the course is, how did you become as vast a person as you are?
Well, that's a great compliment to call somebody a vast person.
That's true.
I think I may be a bit more I play a larger number of strings in my
Yes, you do.
harp than a lot of the people.
Very nice.
You could call it Jack of many trades if you wanted to be demeaning, but one of the most important things my parents did for me was to insist that I learn to play the piano. And that, I think, for the brain and the development of a child is invaluable. It's incredibly important to give 10 different commands to 10 different fingers and maybe a couple more to your feet. And that allows me to multitask in life so easily that I can have so many things going simultaneously and be totally at peace. So that's number one. The other very important thing that they did for me, they sent me at an early age to 12, 13, 14, 15 to different countries just to find my own way, work on a farm,
It's great.
doing a chicken farm 1 year, and then in Germany a cow farm, and then something totally different in Scotland. Grabbing the language, in 3-4 months' time, becoming fluently speaking in German, Danish, and English, and preparing for a career in farming, which was my real intention at an early romantic age. I became a CD farmer initially. I became a musician who developed music, put it out on CDs, and then decorated it with film and did the whole thing. And that's probably the best job to prepare yourself for life, is to be in a band. It's a fantastic establishment to set up and manage and develop. Because it's a basic idea, a lyric, you turn it into a song, shape it, you record it, involve everyone, becomes an economic identity, and then you put it out on record, you do the cover, you do the video, you do the marketing, and then you do the touring to follow it up. And this is a huge industry in the world, but in Iceland, tiny little Iceland, the keyboard player pretty much has to do everything. And that taught me so much, and I'm so grateful for having become a CD farmer instead of a chicken farmer, say.
Yes.
Because farming generally involves slaughtering animals, and I'm less and less interested in that side of life, in eating animals or let alone slaughtering them. So I think who I am is the product of this initial upbringing, opportunity to learn multitasking via music, get the nourishment of the great, the closeness to the Almighty that music brings you.
Yes, when you play, what is it that you're feeling when you play? Oh. What is the experience when you're playing?
It is an orgasmic relief and enlightenment, really. It's the best thing that anyone can do for themselves. Besides, the studying part and the multitasking, but if I'm relaxed and easygoing by nature, that is because when I come home, maybe after a hard day or whatever, I sit down and I play the piano, and whatever stress there may be just flows out of my hands, out of my mind, and I just sit and play anything. I improvise, and it's fantastic.
So when you're playing and you're in that zone, where do you feel that zone comes from?
That is probably the sort of ecstatic place that is the essence of your own soul.
Yes. Would you say this is available to everybody in some way?
Oh yes.
If they can tap it and understand that thing that...
It is what is taught to millions of people via transcendental meditation or yoga or meditation or even exercising or whatever. Anything of, like even golfing is a focusing of mind and
Different from meditation.
Yeah, definitely. I think music is something, if I had my way here in Iceland, I would say that should be the first thing on the curriculum for children.
I had it when I was in school in the States, was music, concert pianist.
And then later on in the school system, through the problems my mother suffered with alcohol and things. I have a great faith in the 12-step system that I think
For
should
me,
be part of
everyone should do the 12 steps,
Yes.
whether they drink or they don't drink.
Absolutely.
Everybody
Yes.
should go through the
Yeah.
12-step program. Because the 12-step program is about evaluating yourself
Absolutely.
and coming to the reality of yourself and accepting yourself
Yeah.
and accepting others.
And I think it's
And surrender, which is not to give up.
My daughters now, I'm fortunate enough to have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they start teaching them yoga at such an early age, and that's great. It's incredible.
If they're teaching the fullness of yoga.
Well, they start by, centering themselves,
Yeah,
sitting
this
in
is
the
great.
lotus
Yes,
position,
yes,
and just relaxing, and then it becomes part of their life and
Exactly.
way of living.
They're lucky because,
Yes.
this is all frequency.
It's something called Hjalla Stefna. It's Margaret Paula who has initiated a new system of teaching, and it's a fantastic. I'm so fortunate to have my daughters there.
It's great the children are doing it.
Yeah.
So this is something that could, in essence, be instituted by anybody in Iceland, really.
Yeah, I think we have, of course, we've gone through a bit of a roller coaster ride here in Iceland. We are a fairly new kind of independent nation as such. We have in the last 60 years since we founded or 70 years now since we founded the Republic, we've managed to develop extremely fast, and then we started perhaps running a bit too fast for our own good before we were confident enough to walk.
Do you think this was partially because Iceland was a country with very little for a long time? And then once this happened, the feeling was, I feel it at any rate, as an outsider in that way, that it developed so people could look like that they had made it. And they did that by material things.
Yeah.
And they wanted to look like Europe, they wanted to look like like the United States.
Yeah.
And this is not, to me, why should these people not be Icelanders? Iceland is great, Icelanders are great. Why should we not be, in some way, the leaders in the world? We have the capacity, I think.
I think we are learning fast, and I think the crash taught us an important lesson. And I'm hoping that people are coming out of the economic turbulence in the world with a bit more maturity and knowledge of how to lead your lives and not to overextend yourself. I think what we have, besides the great resources that luckily nobody is trying to get off us yet anyway, in terms of the clean water, the fish, and the agricultural produce, and let alone the energy resources, we have the luxury of not being owned by anyone, of being independent,
Will we
not
remain
having
that way?
to answer to anyone else.
Right. But will we remain that?
Well, this is the great challenge, because of course we now sense a great interest from, say, China
Yes.
and other parts of the world. Everything is for sale at the end of the day, except for what is guarded by the legislation of Iceland. And we need to be, I think, politically speaking, the best thing that happened to Icelandic politics in the last few years was the election of Jón Gnarr as a mayor, because nobody owned him. He didn't have to answer to any interest groups or any interests except his own. And he is a spiritual man. He is a good man with a good heart.
Yes, I've met him.
And he gave the Mickey. He didn't care about what people thought. He would provoke and challenge Chinese politicians about human rights. He would be leading the human rights of gay people by his
So then let me
symbolic
ask you,
things.
while we have time left,
Yeah.
do you think it's important then for everybody to start thinking about what's happening in our country?
Absolutely. I
Not
think
just leaving it to someone like Jan, but thinking for themselves about what they really want to do and what is the cost of the materialism versus the natural sources of intellect and other things that we have here?
I think the only thing that all religions have in common, anyways, that I've looked at, is the law of karma. What goes around comes around.
Yes, yes.
And when people who realize that you do good unto others, that
Yes.
comes back to you. The people that realize that you have to find a balance between the sense of self-survival and
Yes.
greed.
Greed's a big issue.
And that is the thing, because I think one of the challenges that we are facing in the world today is the greed, for instance, of food manufacturers.
Yes.
They produce things that are good for them, but not necessarily for us. And they promote it via television, onto the shelves. And the lifetime of a food produce can be very harmful to us and
Very
harmful to others. And we had to look at the importance of clean food, clean environment,
Clean
clean water,
thinking.
and clean thinking.
Clean thinking.
And we had to realize that greed and ultra-capitalism
Yes.
is threatening our health
Yes.
and our environment. And I think we are in a unique position here at the border of the habitable world, in the middle of between Europe and America, to establish a clean, safe environment, a healthy psychological environment, and a peaceful society that could be a model to others.
Thank you. I think you've said everything that I would want you to say, because this is how I feel about Iceland. And as we come to a close, my feeling is that I would really like if people would reflect on what Jakob has said, because we need as individuals to look into ourselves in the beginning, just mostly to look into ourselves and to allow ourselves to have more self-esteem, more availability to ourselves, and not so much playing at somebody, but being who we are. So I thank you so much for joining us. It's been just a pleasure. I hope it has been for you. It certainly has been for me. So let me just say that if you wish to reach me or you have questions, you may go to my website, which is www.maximegaudio.com, or you may see me on Facebook, which is always so much fun, isn't it? So I guess in the end, I say again, Kært þakkir og næstu viku.